Hello everyone and welcome to the Age Group Triathlon podcast. Those of you who've been listening before may be pleased to hear I've got myself a microphone. So hopefully the audio quality will improve. It was donated very kindly by my brother Alex Olney, who used it for his YouTube channel Nintendo Life and has decided that he's going to donate it to me, one of his old microphones, which I appreciate a huge amount. So hopefully you'll notice a small improvement in audio quality. In this week's episode, I'm going to be covering two topics. First off, I'm going to look at training over the Christmas period. Now, we're going to assume during this conversation that you celebrate Christmas and also that you enjoy spending Christmas with family. And it's very much a case of juggling training with, wanting to be sociable with your family. The next topic we're going to cover is goal setting for 2025. Okay, so we want to set you up for a fantastic year. And a lot of setting yourself up for that success comes with setting yourself the right goal. So we're going to do a real big deep dive into goal setting, the three types of goals, and how it is that you can keep yourself motivated next year. So let's get ourselves started by talking about December. Now, training in December is a difficult time. October and November can actually be, although the season is ended for most of us in the Northern Hemisphere, can be quite a good time for consistency because the weather's getting colder, you don't have so many social commitments, and you can get some relatively nice uninterrupted training in. However, once we get to December, for the vast majority of us, it's going to be a mixture of family commitments, social events, Christmas parties for various clubs and workplaces, and the month can very quickly slip away from you. You've also got, of course, sort of preparations for Christmas, shopping, food preparation. All of these things are going to be conspiring against you having your weekends available to train. So if we have struggled a little bit for motivation and consistency through December, sort of Christmas provides us, we have a choice. Either we can say, assuming that you have a larger amount of time than normal to yourself over Christmas, you could say, I'm going to double down on volume. I'm going to really get my nutrition right. There is going to be all these exciting things that I'm going to do to really supercharge my performance, things I can't do for most of the year. The other alternative is to go, you know what, I'm going to use this to take a step back, okay? It really matters to me that I spend time with my family. I was so busy with training this year, I should have spent more time with them over the spring or summer period. I wish I had. And you know what? I want to make it up to them. I think it's quite a noble goal to make that decision, but equally, and it's going to be my first point we're going to talk about, it all depends on how serious you are about your triathlon performance. If you are a triathlete, for instance, who has several seasons of racing behind them, who's constantly getting fast, and in 2025, this is the year you're going to turn pro, you probably can't afford to take kind of the sort of 7 to 10 day, depending on how you chop it up in the weekends fall. You probably can't afford to take all that time just to sit around doing nothing. If you are targeting, especially if it's a race in sort of in May, June time, an earlier sort of race where you think, right, okay, I need to finish in this position to qualify for a pro card, then yeah, you need to keep training, you need to use this opportunity to push. Alternatively, if you are targeting a late season race such as Ironman Wales as an example, or Indian Wells, next year, that's going to be your biggest event. You probably don't want to be going too hard with your training this far out from the event, and actually the time would be better spent doing some strength work, doing some easy training, but not using it as an excuse to go really hard on the volume. So it probably goes without saying that the athletes that I work with, I will always ask them, what is it that you're looking to get out of the Christmas period? How much training do you want to fit in? Is there anything that you want to achieve? And their answer will influence my sort of programming sort of hugely. For some people, they want to use it as a chance to do things that are a bit fun. Like you may have somebody who's a very keen swimmer who wants to swim 100 100s in the pool. You may have somebody who wants to do the Rafa Festive 500. And there are all sorts of other little festive challenges out there, different sort of sets and workouts that appear that people can try over the Christmas period. And it really comes down to what motivates you as well. If you've been struggling to get some cycling, but the thought of the Festive 500 really motivates you, sure, let's do it. Let's have a go. Unless you've got a super serious goal coming up, does make a huge difference. And speaking of different goals in the year, if you are a committed duathlete, so if you really enjoy cycling and running, and you've got a pretty big race coming up in February, and you want to qualify for the Worlds or the Europeans or anything like that, then you do need to think about this very differently, because we are coming into what may be actually some of the most intensive period for training over Christmas. So it's very hard, as ever, to give a one-size-fits-all answer here. Now, most of the questions I get relate to the 25th of December or the 24th if someone is in a country where that's the day they really celebrate. Should they do anything? It can be a bit of a debate, training on Christmas Day. Now, I live on my own at the moment, and so for me, I have that free agency to go and do what I want. But, at times where I have been living with my family when I was training or when I went back to visit them over the Christmas period, I'm a relatively early riser, all things being said. I mean, my body doesn't sort of wake me up at 5 a.m. every morning, but I'd be up around sort of 6-ish. And I found that, on Christmas morning, a lot of people, it takes them a long time to get through the shower. They may be spending a little more time on their appearance than normal. For a day where there's going to be lots of families together in one place, there are preparations going on. And, I traditionally, I didn't really have much to do. As I would obviously offer to help, but not a huge amount for me to do within the first kind of 2 to 3 hours on Christmas morning. So why not go out for a run? For me, there was something that was very nice and calming about going out for a run. It's always very quiet if you go out and do a bike ride or a run on Christmas Day. There are a few people out and you wish them Merry Christmas as you go past them. And you know what? It sets me up for the day nicely. Now, obviously I like Christmas. 25th itself, I'm not necessarily an enormous fan of. Obviously, I'm very grateful for the presents and the time that I spend together with my family. When it gets to about 8 p.m, you've been sat on the same sofa for 4 or 5 hours, and you don't really feel that you can take yourself off and excuse yourself to have a bit of time to yourself, because it's a bit rude. I can find myself getting a little bit restless, and I find that if I do go out for a little bit of training in that morning, that actually sort of helps me just feel a little bit more present in the room when things get a little bit later. But what I will say to people, unless I'm explicitly told otherwise, I don't program any training for the 25th. I think if somebody gets up and wants to train on the 25th, they should feel that they absolutely can. But I don't want somebody to wake up to an email from Training Peak saying, here's your workout for today, and they then have to go out and do that training. They feel that they have to if they'd actually rather spend time with their family. They wake up late, they're feeling a bit lazy. People should have the agency on these days to be able to sort of switch off. And the same goes to New Year's Day as well. You always set that as a rest day because people tend to stay up late, maybe have a few drinks, enjoy themselves. And on a day where sort of the world is moving a little bit more slowly, I think it's really sort of nice for us to take one of those rare opportunities just to have a little bit of a break and catch up on other things in life. However, that is simply my opinion, as a lot of this podcast is. If you have different feelings otherwise, don't feel that, Coach Simon said that I shouldn't go training on New Year's Day, so even though I want to go for a bike ride, I'm not going to. Again, it's up to you. You have the agency to decide for yourself. I'm just throwing around ideas of kind of what my philosophy is around it. So, to conclude this section, I would say really it comes down to the individual. You should do as much or little as you like. It depends on what it is that you're in the sport for. If you just enjoy keeping active and social all year round, go for it. Go do your Christmas Day park run. Go do whatever it is that you really want to do and that you're going to enjoy. But try to keep an eye on that long game, okay? Don't sit there and do nothing for 10 days if you know that you have some relatively big events coming up and it's going to be quite a serious year for you. Equally, don't feel that you have to really put yourself through the ringer if you haven't got any big races until later in the year. Next up, we're going to look at goal setting. And for me, having a good goal really is the foundation of a successful year of training and racing. Now, let's take a very basic example here, okay? If somebody has never done a triathlon before, they will say to themselves, I want to become a triathlete, I want to do my first sprint triathlon. Or somebody say, I want to do my first 70.3. I want to do my first Ironman. These are really big, clear goals. But unfortunately, once we've been in the sport for a few years, and we've achieved sort of what we wanted to achieve most basically, which for a lot of people, it's a quest to complete an Ironman one day. Once we've completed that Ironman, where do we go from there? So it can be really difficult because you need to ask yourself, okay, so what is it that's going to motivate me to keep in the sport? You do get some people who do an Ironman and they step away from the sport, and you see them selling their £8,000 bike that they bought on Facebook Marketplace or eBay within sort of a matter of days of crossing the finish line, and that's really sad if you ask me. I think some people just get so bought into the whole idea of becoming an Ironman and the marketing and everything that comes with that once they've achieved their goal, they feel a little bit kind of lost. They maybe can't justify doing another Ironman, which I can understand. For some people, given their sort of their current situation, it may not be feasible to do an Ironman next year. But I think there's a lot of goals that we can set ourselves that is going to be able to motivate us to keep training. Okay, I tried to develop lifelong athletes, people who are always going to do at least one of the sports throughout their life in some way, shape, or form, even if it's just going out for a run a couple of days a week and maybe a cycle ride on the weekend sometimes. I don't really want people to just sell all of their gear and walk away from the sport. So, what kind of goals can we set ourselves to keep ourselves engaged? Now, what about winning the Ironman World Championship? That's a good goal, isn't it? Well, actually, this is the Age Group Triathlon podcast, so we're not going to discuss professionals. We're going to look at the kind of goals that we can achieve as age groupers. So, okay, what about being the fastest age grouper in Kona? That's a pretty good goal, isn't it? Is it realistic for most people? No, not really. So what about if we win our age group at the World Championship, whether that's Nice or Kona? Again, it's quite a tall order. I'm not sure that many people would be able to achieve that. What about getting on the podium? What about getting top 10? What about just qualifying? What about getting within the top 10 in your age group at that event? What about getting within the top 50% of your age group at an Ironman qualifying event? We can take these big goals and we can keep sort of walking them backwards until they get to the place where we go, okay, that sounds actually like something that I could achieve. But it still that goal has to motivate you, and it has to be stronger than your excuses. The thought of achieving that goal has got to be so motivating to you that on the days where you wake up and the last thing you want to do is drive to the pool and jump in the cold water, that you're still going to drag yourself out of bed and get there because that goal is so important to you. So, to achieve this, we need something you may have heard called a BHAG, which is a big, hairy, audacious goal. So this is a goal that is just right, it scares you, it's right on the edge of what you think you can realistically achieve. If I said to myself, I want to win 70.3 Swansea, for instance, that's just impossible. There's no way that's going to happen for me. And that goal isn't going to motivate me because I know that realistically it's not going to happen. So if I'm signed up for 70.3 Swansea and that is my A race, what else can I do to really motivate myself? What is it that's going to get me up in those cold mornings to go out and train? Well, I could say, I want to get the top 10 in my age group. You could say, I really want to go under 2 hours 50 on the bike. It could be a case of I want to be able to run a sub 1:30 half marathon. These are all goals for me that, realistically, I think I could probably just about achieve on the day if the stars aligned and everything went really well. But is that enough to really excite me? So using myself as an example here, none of those targets really speak to me. But what does actually get my juices going a little bit more? Well, there's a local series of events that are run here on Wednesday afternoons, a midweek series. It's 4 months in the summer. And the thought of winning that is actually quite motivating to me. It's something where I know that I could turn up. I wouldn't need to dedicate the same enormous amount of time that someone might need to qualify for the Ironman World Championship, or to perform really well at an Ironman or an Ironman 70.3 event. I know it's the kind of goal that would be more achievable, perhaps on sort of 10 to 12 hours of training a week, and that's an awful lot more manageable than if somebody really wants to excel at longer stuff and is looking at maybe sort of 15 hours a week. And now this is just my opinion, and I know that some people may not really agree with this, but I believe that going really fast over a shorter distance is just as impressive as doing well at an Ironman event. At looking at my age group, looking at the results from the British Sprint sort of triathlon championship last year, I know that if I wanted to win that title, I'd need to get down to around about 17 minutes on the 5k. Now, I've been under 18 minutes before. Admittedly, it was a long time ago now. But for me, the number of people who can go under 18 minutes for a 5k is far less than the amount of people who can just complete an Ironman. And one of the things that attracts people to those longer distances, because they want to challenge themselves over those longer distances, is that they don't like doing the intensity and all the work that's required to go faster over a shorter distance. They find it quite unpleasant, and they say, I'd rather just go all day. And this, I think, is one of the traps that people fall into when they are sort of setting themselves goals, is that they complete their Ironman and they go, right, okay, well, what can I do that's longer? And they'll look at, or harder, and they might look at a double Ironman, and they might go, that's a bit mental, that's a bit much. You're looking at racing through the night there, the training, the distances, it just feels unmanageable. Ironman is actually in a bit of a sweet spot in some respects, because it's an enormous day out, but it is still a single day event, and it is still achievable for sort of the vast majority of people if they put the work in. By the time we start looking at double Ironmans, then we're really starting to get ourselves, into that very ultra endurance world, which, let's face it, not many people realistically have the time to dedicate to do that well. So, if we're working on the assumption that just doing another Ironman in itself isn't super motivating, if we don't really want to do anything much longer, what is it that is going to get us excited? And I can't answer that for you. Again, what excites me may not excite somebody else, and vice versa. But I'm going to throw around a few ideas, some things that you might want to consider when you're setting yourself some goals for 2025. So let's start by looking at going faster over a shorter distance using that example that I provided there. If you want to train for less hours in a week, but you still want to see yourself improve, then going faster is the way to do that. And you may sort of struggle with that idea a little bit, slightly to start with. You may be, it's going to involve all these intervals and hard work, and we're going to be doing hill reps, and we're going to be doing sprints and things. But this is actually the kind of exercise that, as we get older, is really important for us. I read somewhere that sort of 99% of people over the age of 30 will never do any kind of sprinting running again. And when you consider the benefits that come from that kind of explosive effort, to lose that and to just sort of spend the rest of your sort of time sort of pottering around in a sort of comfortably hard zone, we're not going to really achieve that sort of longevity and quality of life that we would get from doing that kind of explosive work. Yes, there is injury risk that comes with it. You need to be very careful. You need to warm up properly. And as triathletes, we probably don't want to be doing much in the way of absolutely 100% effort all at 100 meters. There's not really a lot to be gained from that. But doing really short intervals, sort of 200 meters, going like the absolute clappers, and the kind of work that is required to improve our foot speed, to improve our leg spring stiffness, to improve our ability to buffer lactic acid. All of these kinds of intervals are really worth us doing. And not only are we going to see our performance improve, not only are we going to get faster, we're also going to get a better quality of life than somebody who just does longer, slower workouts all the time. I'm a big fan of, doing lots of easy training. I do subscribe not quite to the church of 80-20, but to a polarized approach. But the component a lot of people miss is that really short, hard work. Something else to consider is another Ironman distance event, but one that isn't run by the company Ironman themselves. Now, there can be a little bit of confusion here, even by people who've completed an Ironman. They don't realise that actually, in most countries, for every Ironman that they run, there are at least a handful of other long distance events which are run by independent race organisers. So you still do your 2.4 mile swim, 112 mile bike, and your marathon at the end. But the entry fee is maybe a quarter of what Ironman might charge you. And it'll be in a very different part of the world. There won't be closed roads, the aid stations won't be so good, but it's still a great experience. It's still a great challenge for you to do. Now, for me to go, oh, you know what, I'm going to go. I know they do an Ironman distance event down in Eastbourne. And the thought of just going to Eastbourne to do that doesn't really excite me much, if I'm honest. However, if you look at some of the events, some of the extreme triathlons that they do, such as Swissman, Keltman, Patagonia Man, all of these, they call them extreme events. They're often held in very challenging conditions, very cold conditions. If you look at Norseman, the swim can be about 11-12 degrees, for which I think it's mandatory actually, if not, it might be recommended, might be mandatory for people to wear gloves and booties in the swim because of how cold it is. You have somebody to aid you in transition. You can have outside assistance when you're on the bike, when you're going through what are normally sort of very cold, mountainous bike routes. And on the run, they often finish by going up a mountain. And it is mandatory for most of these events for you to have somebody with you for sections of these runs to make sure you don't get yourself into any trouble. And I think, to me, that is more motivating than putting in a bit of a faster time. And I would actually, if I went and I did something like Norseman or Swissman, I'm probably prouder of my ability to finish that than I would for qualifying and doing well at the Ironman World Championship. Again, a lot of you may balk at that and go, oh no, Ironman is the ultimate, Ironman is what motivates me. You know what? That's fine. Take it, run with it. It doesn't matter to me. What I'm trying to get across is it's really about what matters to you, what drives you, what excites you. And one of the big pieces which makes somebody go, oh, I haven't got the time for Ironman, I need to walk away from the sport, it's literally that time component. And they go, look, I've taken a lot of liberties training for this event for the last 2-3 years. It's over now. My other half is not excited about me doing one again. So I need to step away from the sport. However, you can look at the shorter distances, or you can look at a different kind of approach to swimming, cycling, and running. You could train for a long distance swim. You could train to try and improve time over the marathon. A lot of people who do Ironman, the marathon that they run on the day might be the only one that they have ever run. I don't think that doing a marathon in the run-up to an Ironman is an especially good idea, if I'm honest. The amount of training it requires to be able to do it well, the amount of fatigue it generates, the injury risk from all that running, especially when we're trying to fit in swimming and cycling. I think it's a bit of a mistake more often than not, unless somebody's a really seasoned runner, to feel they've got to get that marathon in before their Ironman. An Ironman marathon is such a different beast to a standalone road marathon that you're not going to learn an awful lot in the kind of 4-5 hours that you go out and you do your first marathon. relative to just how exhausted you're going to be coming off that bike on the day at the Ironman. But if you can say, you know what, I want to go sub 4 over the marathon. I want to go sub 3 over the marathon. That is a goal that can be achieved in an awful lot less time than training for an Ironman. Something else you can do is you can drop your least favourite discipline from your training if you would like. If you have done your Ironman, but you hate swimming, you have no motivation to get any faster, you've done your Ironman and you don't want to touch it again. Okay, fair enough. Have you considered duathlon, which is running, cycling, and then running? There are loads of shorter events. However, there's an event in Wales, if you are really looking for an endurance challenge, which is a 15-mile run, then a 116-mile bike in the mountains, followed by a 9-mile run up Snowdonia. Mount Snowdon itself. So that is an absolute beast of a day out. And I would say, personally, that's probably harder than most Ironmans. So what about aquathlon? If you just don't get on with a bike, or I guess sort of an issue that people can have is they don't really have the time they need to put in to get faster at cycling. If they have a young child and they need to spend lots of time with them, if they just have commitments which stop them from being able to go out and put in these 3-4 hour bike rides that they need to do well, what about dropping the cycling completely? If you do aquathlon, which is swimming followed by running, generally speaking, there aren't that many events which are super long. You can get some swim-run events where you tend to swim from island to island, run across the island, and then sort of do that on and off. Those are very popular in Northern Europe, and there are some, in the UK as well. I'm not quite sure how popular they are in the US. I'm sure there are some around. But that is something else that you can look at. Additionally, if you either hate running, you're just not very good at it, or you can't run, you could look into an aqua bike event, which is where you do the swim, then you do the bike, and you're done there. For me personally, there is something that's still very special about triathlon. I've done duathlons before, I've done quite well at them, but when I cross that finish line, I just don't have that same sense of achievement that I have when I do a triathlon, because I didn't pull myself out of the water after a swim. I know it sounds silly, it changed the dynamic of the day so much, that open water swim, that I just feel so much more sort of motivated and energised to train for triathlon rather than duathlon. But again, that's me and my personal opinion on that. Okay, so hopefully by this point, I've at least discussed one thing that has piqued your interest and you thought, oh, you know what? That's quite interesting, that is. That is motivating to me. So we now need to look at, setting an actual goal itself, because something like get a PB isn't really going to be that sort of motivating to you. It's not going to help you that much. So I'm going to look at the 3 types of goals, and then we're going to have a look at how to actually sort of create sort of a better way of setting goals that are nice and realistic for us, being challenging but not too out of reach. So a lot of the goals that I've talked about on the podcast today so far are those goals which are outcome goals, which are place well in a race or win a race. This is a goal which you're not in full control of. Now, it's not necessarily a bad goal to have. It's simply a goal which you're never going to be fully in control of. And in triathlon, it's going to depend a lot on who turns up on the day. If you turn up to a small race and you think to yourself, you know what, I think I can win this, but you have somebody who is a recently retired pro who then turns up, who's gone back to the age group ranks and absolutely decimates you, then you failed that goal. You got, oh, I didn't win the race. Of course, I didn't stand a chance of winning the race, but nonetheless, if your whole year, if all of your training has been built around winning that race, and that is taken away from you, some would say unfairly, that a professional can go back to age group racing. I don't think it's unfair personally, but you were beaten by a better athlete who you realistically had no chance of beating, then you failed that goal, and that leaves a bit of a bitter taste in your mouth because your training may have gone absolutely perfectly, but yet you're sat there sort of feeling like a failure at the end. So the next type of goal we can have is a performance goal, which is much less reliant on what other people around us are doing. Now there are still environmental factors, of course. If I say I want to go out and I want to do a sub 6 hour Ironman bike ride, and I turn up on race day and it's absolutely blowing a gale and it's raining really hard, that is going to have an impact on my ability to complete that goal. But generally speaking, there are far less outside influences that will stop you from achieving a performance goal relative to an outcome goal, which really is dependent on what those around you are doing. So for a good performance goal, it should be something that is sort of challenging for you, but also inspiring you, as we touched on earlier. It needs to be something you feel is, it's a little, it scares you just that little bit. You think, oh, I'm really not sure if I'll be able to do that. I think for me, an example would be a sub-3 marathon. I'm very good over 5k, over shorter distances, not so much over the longer distances, but I know that I have the foundations of what would be required for a sub-3 marathon. But it would take a really focused approach. I probably want to work with a coach to help me get there. But it has to be a goal that's going to really sort of motivate me, spur me on, and be just that right bit between sitting between my sort of my comfort zone and my panic zone. To be in that kind of that level of kind of uncomfortableness rather than of sheer panic. There's no way this is going to get done, because that can have a devastating effect on your motivation if you just feel there's no chance of you completing your goal. And the final type of goal is a process goal. So that is a goal that you may have along the way that you want to be able to achieve in your training. So it may be something like, I'm going into a max phase of strength and I want to be able to squat twice my body weight. Or it could be, I want to get my FTP up to 270 watts. It could be that you want to be able to sort of get your park run time down to a certain sort of mark on a course that you've been struggling with. These aren't necessarily your big season-long goals. These are simply smaller goals that you can tick off along the way that help keep you motivated and help you work towards that big overarching performance or outcome goal. Now, you don't want to end up putting a huge amount of effort into these process goals, especially if they are not going to be super relevant to the event that you're doing. So if I'm looking to do my first Ironman, but I also want to go under 25 minutes at a park run, how much is that taking sort of 30-40 seconds off of a park run time really going to influence my performance at an Ironman? Chances are not very much at all. Nobody really cares what your 5k PB is if you are walking the marathon because you're cramping up, you've got really bad nutritional upset, and everything's falling apart in the race itself. There is so much more to an Ironman than that sheer speed over a 5k. So you do need to make sure that the goals that you have are relative or going to be complementary to your overarching goals. So I think personally that you should use all three goals. So I think having an outcome goal can be nice and motivating, because most of us as triathletes are, these relatively competitive people. And the thought of placing within the top 10%, the top 50%, getting on the podium, be able to, compare ourselves and go, wow, I am faster than that percentage of people, that is really powerful. That's really important. And I would say, if that motivates you, there's nothing wrong with choosing that. And again, having a performance goal, not basing all of your self-worth on how you do compared to others, is also super important. So it may be that you have an overall time in mind. It may be that you want to complete one of the legs in a certain amount of time. Having that more performance focused goal, I think, as a triathlete, is probably a healthy way to motivate yourself, so that you don't go into it thinking, oh, there's just loads of people here who are so much faster than me, and I feel a bit of a failure for getting dropped really badly in the swim. That's not going to make us feel nice. And I also think that process goals can help give us little stepping stones along the way. If you have one of those sort of every month, every couple of months, something that you want to achieve, something that's going to act as a little breadcrumb that's going to stop you from getting maybe a little bit complacent with your training, which I know that some people can get to the point of. Then again, I think that is powerful. That's something you can leverage. So you may have heard about SMART goals. And this is something that I don't necessarily think is as powerful and useful as some people make them out to be. However, I think it's something that we should still cover, because you can take at least 2 or 3 of these points and take them away to help you set your own goals. So the S stands for specific. Now, for us as triathletes, if we were to say that we wanted to achieve some kind of record in a kayak, we're probably not setting ourselves up for success. So the more that we specify a goal and make it sort of relevant to our own performance, then the more that's going to motivate us. So rather than saying, I want to get faster on the bike, we could say, I want to go under 3 hours on the bike at a 70.3 this year. So that in itself, being that sort of that bit more specific rather than being a bit loose, I just want to be a better triathlete, drilling down and getting quite specific with your goal can help. Next up, the M stands for measurable. So we should be able to measure our progress towards achieving this goal, and we should also be able to measure our ability to have completed that goal on the day. So I'm going to stay with the example of going sub 3 on a 70.3 bike. And you go, okay, to achieve that, I'm going to need to average 30 kilometers an hour on my rides. So on my weekend long rides, as I get fitter, as I'm riding in zone 2, as I'm getting more efficient, more aerodynamic, am I able to start averaging that 30 kilometer an hour mark on my long rides? If I am, I know that I'm able to then working towards that goal, and I've got a good chance of achieving it. And also on the day itself, the fact is we can measure that and we can see, how quickly did I complete the bike leg in? 2 hours 58 minutes. Great, done it. Next up, is the goal achievable? If I did a 70.3 last year and it took me 3 hours and 45 minutes to complete the bike, is jumping all the way to going sub 3 achievable? I mean, it might be. If you did that 3 hours 45 on a mountain bike, you hadn't ridden a bike for ages, you got a puncture, you really weren't that fit, but you've now got yourself a nice road bike, you've done a lot of training, it might not be completely out of the realms of possibility. But yeah, the goal, as we've touched on a bit previously, it needs to be realistic. You can't say, oh, you know what, I want to go sort of sub 2.5 if you haven't even gone under 3 hours previously. Because that, as you get faster, it becomes that bit more difficult to find those gains. So you do need to make sure that your goal is realistic, so you don't set yourself up for disappointment. The next part of SMART goals is relevant. So, is the goal that we've set relevant to our broader objective? Now, this, I guess, really comes into, we touched on this with the process goals. It really is for process goals rather than your big overarching goals. But it is to say, okay, I'm going to, I want to be able to deadlift this amount of weight. Is that going to help make me a faster triathlete? Yes, it probably will, by giving me more strength in my posterior chain from all the training that would help me achieve that. If I wanted to learn bird song and be able to recite that, is that going to help me achieve my triathlon goals? No, probably not. So again, bit of an extreme example there, but you need to make sure that the process goals that you have set yourself are going to help you achieve your overarching goal. And the T stands for time bound. So for us as triathletes, actually, this is really easy because we've got race day, and we know that we need to get ready for this time. But if you were setting yourself goals in other areas of your life and said, "Oh, I want to be able to earn this amount of money by this time, I have this much in my pension pot," when are you going to set yourself that goal to achieve that by, rather than just leaving it as being open ended? So this is the difference between, like a relatively poor goal would be, I want to get faster on the bike. Whereas a good goal would be, at 70.3 Swansea, I want to be able to ride under 3 hours on race day in July. And that is a very specific, is measurable, is probably achievable goal that is going to be an awful lot more motivating than just that very vague, "Oh, I guess I'd kind of like to get faster on the bike." I also feel I should give a nod here to multi-year goals. So rather than thinking about just what you can achieve in 2025, think about what it is that you want to achieve long term. So it could be that you really think, if you are in your early 20s, you really feel that you could go pro in 2 or 3 years' time. Okay, well, what goals can you set yourself this year to achieve that? You may think to yourself, "Oh, I think that I could become the middle distance champion in my country over the sort of 70.3 middle distance. But I'm going to need a few years to get there." What is it that you can do between now and then to achieve that? So don't be afraid to think slightly longer term as well. It doesn't just have to be everything right now that you're focusing on. And to illustrate just how powerful a really good goal can be, I had a phone call with a client of mine who's coming back after a couple of months away. And he was telling me about what he's been doing between now and then and what it is that he wanted to do. And he was telling me about, he's been running 5Ks in sort of the sub 19-minute mark. And he was looking to do a marathon. He's going, "Oh, I'm just like thinking that maybe I can. You may think it's a bit crazy." And I said to him, "You want to go sub 3, don't you?" And he goes, "Yes." And coming away from that, the idea of going under that 3 hour mark, it just excited him so much. And then hearing me think, yes, that is what you want to do, and then I think you can achieve it, really got him fired up and exciting to train. So having that good goal that people around you believe in. He said that he had a lot of doubters, and the people who don't think he's going to get anywhere close to 3 hours are also part of what fueled him. But, having that conversation with a coach who can then go, "You know what? Yeah, I think we can do it. Let's go get it." That in itself is incredibly motivating as well. So there we have it. As promised, that was a real bit of a deep dive into goal setting there. But I do think it is incredibly important, if you want to set yourself up for a really good 2025, to start thinking about that goal now. Start writing them down. Start telling people that you're going to do it. Stick it in Training Peak. Stick it on social media. Make yourself accountable and go and chase that goal. Really hope you found that useful. I am trying to organise a couple of episodes, get some interviews done over the next week, so I've got some content to release over the Christmas period. I don't really want to do too many of these sort of solo casts myself in a row. I know it can get a little bit dull. So if I manage to get those interviews, hopefully you'll see them dropping into your podcasting platform over the coming weeks. If not, I'll see you all in the new year. Have yourself a great Christmas if you celebrate.